Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Climate Adaptation Show from the Solar Shed. I'm really happy today. I've got someone with me as a guest I'm going to introduce to very soon, who I've known for 32 years, 33, 34 years, since I was a young police officer on the housing estate of South East London, where he was a young councillor. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Donnachadh McCarthey. Great to see you, Donnachadh. Great to see you. Come and sit down. For those of you who don't know, Donnachadh McCarthey, you might have seen him before on the news. He's always pushing back against I'm going to refer to them as the pro-climate lobby, the pro-climate change lobby. The people who object to what we do, the people who are always objecting to solar farms, to windmills, they don't believe in climate change. And you're one of the leading lights of the environmental movement who, I'm going to say, pushes back against the press. How on earth did that come about?
Good question. It came about actually because I was involved with a lot of protests.
Yep.
I've been involved in the movement for 30 years with many different hats. I've been a councillor, politician.
You involved in the Reclaim the Streets years ago as well?
Occupy Democracy.
Occupy Democracy, yeah.
Extinction Rebellion.
Yes.
Stop Killing Cyclists.
That's the one, Stop Killing Cyclists.
So I've been involved in many protest groups, but I've also been involved in many other areas where as a councillor, politician, I've been a journalist, a writer.
Well, I first knew you as a resident in Peckham, and you were a Liberal Democrat councillor, a ward councillor. Were they called ward councillors or borough councillors?
Ward
councillors for the borough of Southwark in South London.
Right, yeah.
And I have talked about this in my book and also in other shows that we've done, where I've done, as a police officer, we've done environmental campaigns, the Ales Green Bloom, and we planted different things. And Donnachadh was, I would say, one of the inspirations behind that. You were one of the body of people that we all networked with, where these ideas were spawned from. And as the police officer, I was just a respectable front man for all of these ideas. But that's where we first met. And I think it must have been, I went on to that beat in 94. So it must have been 94, 95 when we first met.
Yeah, I was elected in 94. I served from 94 to 98.
Okay, so it would have been about that time. So that's 30 years we've known each other.
Yeah.
And it's the first time since I think we've bumped into each other once in London. I come down to meet you once. We bumped into each other very briefly once, but this is the first time we've actually spent any time together for God knows how many years.
Yeah, but it feels like through social media we've maintained the friendship.
Well, this is the positive side of social media. People are always slagging off social media, aren't they? But the positive side of social media, I don't know what you guys think, but for me, I've remade my friends, but I've also found my cohorts that allow me to have a voice. Instead of me just shouting on my own, I know I'm surrounded by like-minded people through those people that I've found on social media. How do you find it? Because I know you get quite a bit of pushback, don't you, yourself, from the campaign? Yeah, when you're campaigning against, let's say, you're in favour of the low traffic neighbourhoods and cycling, taxis aren't. No, do you know what I mean? Though? So
Sure.
do you get quite a lot of hate as well as?
Yeah. I get floods of it, especially if I do a lot of right-wing media, TV and radio. And the hate mail is
Well, the hate mail of the newspaper or the hate mail that you get personally?
No, directly.
Right,
Even
okay.
sometimes you just get middle of the phone night death threats.
Really?
Yeah, but what it does provide, that's the negative.
Yeah.
But we always have choice about sticks and stones.
That's my attitude.
So
the things I've been called. Of late, I know that I'm becoming more recognised as a voice within our industry, purely because of the amount of bots that attack me now. If I've got a tweet or a post that starts getting a bit of traction, the amount of hate, and the best one is...
But the positive is that so that's the negative, but the positive is that you have networks, support networks.
Yeah.
And the other thing I find very useful about social media, is maintaining relationships with people in the field.
Yes.
Which is, as you say, reminds us that we're not alone.
It's instant communication as well,
and we're not alone.
Yes, that's it. We're not alone.
But the other thing I find very useful, because I do so many radio and TV views on behalf of the movement, whether it's the climate movement or the nature movement, is that if I've got a phone call and I say they want me on in 2 hours or 3 hours, I can put a posting up on my Facebook page saying, I'm doing an interview on solar installations. Mm. What are people's suggestions, comments, research?
It's all relevant and fresh.
Yeah, and so I have got this. Social media acts as a research tool for me that I couldn't be able to afford myself.
Mm.
And it's
no, that makes sense. Yeah, it's the same as networks. Even networks that can do it publicly, or we can do it on LinkedIn, or we can do it in closed groups. You know, we've got various networks, various forums. You can ask a question, get all the information, and it's instant.
And so that's one really good. And the other really advantage I find from it is it's a support group. I think people like, if you're in the media, you're like at the front of the front line, and so the attacks can be quite powerful because we're dealing with legacy multi-billionaire companies.
And we're just normal people, mate. With no money behind us.
No money. But through social network, you can actually identify that you have actually people behind you. That you actually, when you're not actually just sitting there in a TV.
Does that give you some comfort, does it?
It gives
just knowing.
Moral and spiritual support.
Yeah, but the moral support.
I'm not there by myself. I'm there with people behind me. I can almost feel the energy coming through me. I'm able to speak on behalf of a movement.
Yeah.
Well, I'm there as Donnachadh McCarthey an individual.
But on the movement side, so you're one of the most prominent, I would say, prominent campaigners. I wasn't going to use the word protester. We'll talk about that a bit later. But as a campaigner, you're there front and centre at everything, basically for humanist causes. Yeah,
No, I don't. I try and.
Well, not humanist in the truest sense, but I'm talking about, it's about that localism, that engagement in communities. It's about growing the food. It's about living a low impact lifestyle. The things that are good for humans.
I would say I don't, even though my political support would be a progressive, I have chosen, once I left politics, I'm not a member of any political party, because I think climate and nature are beyond politics.
Yeah, they are.
There are political reasons for every political view to value climate. If I'm a liberal, a liberal says, do what you want in the world so long as it doesn't damage others.
Yep.
So as a liberal, I've got to look after climate. If I'm a socialist, I want people to be able to afford to buy their food. Climate makes food expensive. Yep. So a socialist has to look after the climate. If I'm a right-wing Tory that believes in the market, you cannot have an economy without a stable climate. So and if you're green, obviously you want to protect nature. So whether you're green, a Tory, a liberal, or anything, you have a vested interest in these issues. And so because I believe we're facing an existential threat on nature and climate, I want to be above politics.
So why aren't all the politicians and all the political parties and the things that influence the way that you think, the media, why aren't they pulling in the same direction then?
Interestingly, in British political terms, up to around 5 years ago, we generally had a consensus that there was a climate crisis. I would argue that in the last 5 years, our billionaire-owned media have picked up the campaigns from America where the right-wing media had been lobbied by the oil industry, billionaires.
Yeah.
They have picked up that to be a right-winger means to be against climate change. And they have mistaken the climate movement as a left-wing movement as opposed to a movement that is actually essential to our economy.
It is essential. It's not just our economy, it's globally, isn't it?
And I think that actually people like the Coke industries have invested over 30 years to get to a stage of getting the billionaire media to treat it as a left-right issue. And then that billionaire media has persuaded the right-wing party in America to go from being, remember the Republican Party under John McCain's presidential election was pro-climate action so long as it was based on market mechanisms. The difference between the Democrats and the Republicans at that general election was the Democrats are in favor of climate change using regulation. The Republicans were in favor of using market mechanisms.
Free market, yeah.
Post that, Fox News, the Murdoch press, etc., and the Cllr press got it to a situation where the propaganda brainwashed the American public that if you were a right-winger, you had to oppose climate change. That has now crossed the Atlantic 5 years ago, and we have now got that permeating our politics, and the consensus has broken down in the last 2 years, and that's a real problem.
But you say the consensus. I mean, I know there's I call it the rise of the right. I mean, you know, the anti-immigration party, they've got a lot of popularity at the moment because of their messaging is on point. Their messaging resonates with people. But also when we start looking at their policies, and these are the people that we're supposed to be fearing, people in our movement are supposed to be fearing. When you look at their policies, they are actually anti-jobs, anti-growth, and anti-community. If you look at the policies, if they're going to say they're not going to support any, I don't like the term net zero because it's got
Totally
a political wing to it.
Green transition, clean green energy,
which is what we all want.
Green economy.
Who doesn't want cleaner air, cheaper bills, and self-generation?
Net zero.
Who doesn't?
Net zero rings the bell. Net zero subconsciously strikes the psychological point of zero-sum game.
Yep.
And so I actually think the right-wing think tanks and the oil billionaires have done market research and realized the phrase net zero strikes negative subconscious notes, and so they've changed their name from Global Warming Policy Foundation to Net Zero Watch. Why? I believe they didn't do that accidentally.
I wasn't aware of that.
They didn't do that. I believe they didn't do it. I believe they did market research and said, this works for us.
It's the same as all newspapers. It doesn't matter what you read. If you say something 3 times or repeat it 3 times, it then becomes a fact, doesn't it? In the minds
but
of the
words
reader.
of power. I think
words have got a lot of power.
You know, when I heard the word Brexit,
go on.
I went, I'm not allowed to say expletive. I went F-U-C-K.
Yep.
Oh my God, we've lost.
Because it was such a simple Brexit, take back control, simple, on-point messages.
And I would argue in London, we made a mistake. A good and interesting example was when we were campaigning for safe cycle lanes in London, the mayor came to our side and the first cycle lanes were called superhighways.
Yeah.
Huge backlash.
Why?
Because the phrase superhighway was a threat. You're changing my nice, safe street into a superhighway. It pressed subconscious emotions in people. They went, oh my God, there's a threat to my life. And the right-wing media picked it up and there was a huge backlash. The mayor changed the phrase. They called it cycleways. The opposition evaporated.
Because it's very, very non-confrontational. It's just a cycle.
So I really agree. We need to drop net zero.
We do. There's a lot of phrases. But you also, there's another movement group. I mean, I think it's a loose collection, but the Climate Media Coalition.
Sure, yeah.
Now, I remember first picking up on that. I didn't realise it was you because or you're behind it, aren't you? Yeah. I wasn't aware of that at the time, but at the time you were a columnist and features writer in the Independent.
That's right, yeah.
I think it was the same time I was doing some writing for our local newspaper.
Yeah.
So I used to do a monthly thing. I've done it for about 3 years. And I remember, the Climate Media Coalition. I thought, oh yeah, I'm a journalist now. I'm a reporter, so I can be part of. That's very good at picking up. So I would like to see more. It's a full-time job, picking up on what people are saying and then trying to push back against it. I appreciate. But I think the concept of that is a really nice one because it's a collective of people, the people that you follow and the people that follow you, are people who are on what I believe we are on the right side of history. But together we've got a voice which can resonate with people. It's a matter of getting out to that bigger audience. Having a few hundred people, a few thousand people on Twitter, doesn't matter how influential they are, unless we're getting out to the people eating their cornflakes in the morning. That's the issue, isn't it? That's the issue. But if we're being sacked from newspapers, I mean, I was sacked. They said it was because they had changing the format of the newspaper. The last 2 columns I wrote were all about the lies of the government at the time, which was Johnson's government.
Sure.
And it was the lies coming out of them. And I was just, it might have been in Rishi Sunak's. But
so it's the Tories,
and this is a very, very Tory area. Sure. And I'm sure things have been, as that happens, we've got an independent council now, and it's all very, very different. We've got Greens in cabinet, which is great, Michael Dewally, and it's great. It's a different ball game.
Interesting, I got fired as well.
This was a different reason, but wasn't this from Boris Johnson's friend?
Yeah, that's right. Bizarrely, the Independent,
yes,
which is set up to be a progressive paper,
yeah,
was set up by journalists who wanted to provide an alternative newspaper in Britain that wasn't owned by the billionaire class.
Yep. And who owns it now?
A billionaire.
And that's
Lebedev.
Lebedev, yeah.
And so Lebedev was very good friends with Boris.
Yep.
And very good friend.
Apparently it's a holiday in Greece, didn't they?
No, Italy.
Italy. Yeah. According to 1 or 2 newspapers. The mainstream newspapers didn't want you to know about that. And this is when he was foreign secretary, wasn't it?
And so Boris was a good friend of Lebedev, and Boris was very good friends with Geordie Greig. Geordie Greig was editor of the Daily Mail, a very anti-climate action and very pro-Brexit. And he got fired by Paul Dacker. And so Lebedev said, I can give you a job. So he gave him the editor of the Independent. I got fired the first week.
Because of your politics, being a progressive, open,
well,
honest.
there's also I believe there's movement, I think there's room in the climate movement for all approaches.
We need people coming from the fossil fuel industry. They've got insight on energy. They can also got mass distribution networks. We need to distribute what we're generating sensibly. We've had so much delay though, haven't we? But listen, we're talking about.
But going back to, you asked me what I got involved in climate coalition.
Yeah.
So after my nearly 30 years of activism, I've done politics, I've done media, I've done journalism, I've done protests, I've done being arrested, I've done being a green guru, I've turned my house into London's first carbon negative house. I've done the whole range. Wait, let me finish.
Go on.
I've done the whole range of where can I make the most difference to stop us trashing climate and nature, on which we all depend. And after 25, 30 years, I came to the conclusion the most important place where the climate movement hasn't put attention on is the ownership and editors of our major media. Because I believe power doesn't reside in Downing Street or in Parliament. If you want power in Britain, you buy the Daily Mail, you buy the Sun, you set up your own TV company with millions of pounds to fund it. And that controls the population's thinking. The population's thinking controls what the government wants, and the government obeys. It's extraordinary. Even if the people support action, and on climate they do. What did Dominic Cummings tell the select committee after COVID? Click set up an inquiry. He said, Boris Johnson gets up every morning. What's the first thing he does? He looks at the front pages of the right-wing billionaire-owned media, and then he gives us instructions.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And so I believe that, so I decided in
they're creating the news rather than reporting the news.
So I decided in 2015, the most important thing we as a movement are failing to do is get the media owners and editors of the right-wing press, the billionaire media, on our side. And I believe, can you imagine, listeners and yourself, can you imagine if the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Telegraph, GB News all said, we must act urgently on climate and nature?
Oh, listen, the transition would happen tomorrow. It would happen tomorrow.
So why aren't we paying attention to it?
It's a good point.
I think
it's a
that's
good point.
The core.
It's a very powerful point. I just want to touch on something here. Right. Donnachadh, back in 1990 something, I remember having a conversation with him just before a tenants meeting on the Aylesbury estate in Walworth. And you told me that you had found some money that you'd forgotten you'd had, some inheritance money, and you purchased solar panels with them. And I laughed at him. We used to do gardening competitions, and we used to do in bloom competitions on urban housing sites, get kids to plant up flowering baskets and community orchards. And I laughed at Donnachadh when he said solar, and I said solar in England, and you've done it. Donnachadh was the first person, 1999? 98, to get a feed-in tariff 12 years before the Clean Energy Cashback Scheme was introduced by Ed Miliband in 2010, which we believe kickstarted the industry. Donnachadh had the very first one. Who was your energy company?
London Electricity.
They don't even exist anymore. And you were getting about a penny a kilowatt hour. It wasn't for generation. It was only for export, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It was extraordinary.
And you had that contract in place until recent years?
No. I can't remember how many years that lasted. Probably 10 or 15 years.
Fantastic.
But they were paying me grid price, which was they were paying me grid price, not domestic price.
Right.
Which was like, I can't remember. It was tiny.
Right. Okay.
But what's important to me is to establish the principle. So I became the first person in Britain to have a feed-in tariff.
Wow.
But the other interesting thing was, I was passionate about it. I just thought solar makes sense. And in 98, I thought the purpose of a electricity company is not to produce electricity.
It's to deliver electricity. Go on.
It's to manage electricity.
Yeah, okay.
And I said in 98, the purpose in the future will be paying the electricity company to manage our energy, not to produce it.
And that's the way we're going. That's the way we are going.
But it's taken us 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit longer than I expected. So at the time, the government at the time said you can't install solar, we can't retrofit it. it could only put in, they actually said it can only put in new houses. And so I said, I want to prove them wrong.
Yes.
So I live in a terrace Victorian house in central London.
Yeah.
2 up, 2 down. Old terrace Victorian house. And they said...
In Peckham. In Peckham.
And so I said, I want to prove them wrong. But at that stage...
Yeah, that's something that comes with both of us. I'm up for a challenge. I was told I would never set up a solar company in the shed at the bottom of the garden in a village with no street lights and no pavements. And here we are 18 years later.
The impossible is possible.
I was told it was impossible to do lots of things in like a crime-free week on the Aylesbury estate. 7 years, but we've done it.
Wow.
It's little things, and I think the human resolve is something that's quite deep in the likes of us, isn't it? If we're told we can't do it and we know it's the right thing to do, we're going to do it.
So I set up, but the problem was it was around £10,000 per kilowatt installed.
My word. Yeah.
And sorry, that's in 98 value.
Yes.
So God knows what that's probably what, 20,000.
You've got picking up panels for 60, 70 quid a time. It's going up a little bit
there's
now,
no
70,
way.
80 quid
So
a time.
I was on a minimum wage at the time. I could no way I could afford it. And so my mother died, and
what a great legacy though, to buy something like that. That we call that in the trade nowadays, when people spend their inheritance, people are usually in their 40s and 50s who have got some money, we call it a legacy purchase because your mum lives on with you.
That's a nice way of putting it.
I think it's right.
So my mother died, left me 20 grand. I was on very low wage.
Taxman's watching, be careful.
No,
they'll have you.
It was perfectly legitimate. And I thought, I have a choice between paying off some of my mortgage, which is a sensible thing to do, or having my dream.
You went for the dream.
I went for the dream. And actually, it gave me a lot, actually. But aside from... So what first thing I proved... And in those days, literally, the entire solar industry was a couple of sheds.
Yes.
A couple of people in the back sheds. And so trying to get somebody to... was making... It was Sundog.
Yeah,
Martin...
I know the name Sundog.
Cottrell.
Yes.
Lovely guy. Used to work in Greenpeace.
He's still around.
Passionate. He doesn't run the company any longer. I think it got
No, but I'm sure I know that name.
He's very much involved in Department of Energy standards and stuff like that.
Okay. Oh, that's probably where I picked his name up from various
amazing guy. But he was a passionate, so I linked with him and we installed. But the other thing I did it. And then London, I wanted to prove, so I was negotiating with London Electricity over 2 months. And they're very nice guys, and we're nearly getting into a contract. And then they came back to me and they said, no, we can't do it. The boss says we can't do it. So I thought what must have happened is they went to the boss and said, we've got this guy we want to sell, who wants to buy, that we have to buy electricity for them. And he's going, what the hell are you going? A householder buying house electricity? That's mad. We're not going to do it. So it's the only time in my life I did what I call, what do I call it?
So Greg Jackson wouldn't have a business model about you.
I call it benevolent manipulation. I don't believe in blackmail. I call it whitemail.
I like to persuade people to come around my way of thinking. How did you do it?
So my whitemail was, I said to them, that's really unfortunate. We've had a very good relationship in this negotiation. It'd be terrible if I had to go to the media and saying you're refusing to buy electricity from a poor householder. And I had a profile at the time, and it's the only time I've exploited my profile to get something to happen. Now,
there's nothing wrong with doing that. That's good.
2 days later, the contract's on the table, and and
you're the first person in this country to have a feed-in tariff.
And the second thing the House has used,
but it wasn't a generation tariff; it was a genuine feed-in tariff, which we have now, which is the smart export guarantee. It should have always been.
Yeah.
Look, we needed something to kickstart the industry, but I hated the feed-in tariff scheme. One, the way it was sold and presented.
I didn't hate it, but it wasn't.
No, trust me. I'll tell you why. Because I had 8 years of walking around housing estates with people who couldn't afford to put beans on their toast. But they were having to pay 15% of their electricity bill, so people like me could go and give subsidies to people who could afford.
It wasn't 15%.
I think it was 11% on electricity and 9% on gas, or the other way round at one point.
No, what people often forget is that
I'm talking about the climate change levy.
There's climate, but there's also the social levy, and there's the network levy. So not all of it.
Right.
The actual solar part is quite small.
Okay. But it was something that didn't need to be. Those who couldn't afford and couldn't have solar, we're all being forced to pay into it. There are people living on flats on the Aylesbury estate.
Anybody paying taxes. but what it did is that if you
it gave me a job.
But what it also did is that it helped bring down the price so that more and more people.
Oh, just a little bit. I mean, our first systems, I mean, you're talking about 10,000 a kilowatt. We were putting them in 2010 at 24,000 for 4 kilowatts. But that is because we were driving over to Rotterdam in transit to get the panels.
And the mass production, the Feed In Tariff benefited poorer people in an indirect way.
Not yet. I don't think it has yet.
Well,
it will.
More and more
when
people,
we break the cycle of gas.
More and more people who are on lower incomes are able to afford what I did. And
now we've got investment.
Millions of people can have, was actually only a tiny group.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. Oh, definitely, it definitely drove demand, which brought prices down and drove innovation in the technology.
And that means that it will get to poor people.
It will.
But you have a valid point. You have a valid point.
I don't like take money from people who can't afford it.
You have a valid point, and I call it. Well, I do a lot of right-wing interviews with people like Farage and Rees-Mogg and. What I learned from that is a number of things. But one of the most important things that I learned from it is what the right-wing billionaire media does. They look at an environmental policy or climate policy or nature policy and think, is there anybody who's poor will pay any cost for this? Will it impact the poor? And they'll find maybe an example of a poor person that will impact. And they'll hammer it and destroy it.
Oh, yeah.
And so the policy will be destroyed for everybody. So then the rich don't have to pay it, the middle class don't have to pay it, and the whole thing gets destroyed. So what I got from that, I think there's a point to be made. We environmentalists and climate campaigners must ensure that our policies don't impact the poor negatively. They should impact them positively. And I believe we can do that in many ways.
Of course we can.
So first example, the standing charge is a poll tax on the poor. Because
that's the service we pay for the grid connection and transmission wires.
Yeah. So if I'm an elderly pensioner living in a 1-bedroom flat, my share of the infrastructure to bring the electricity to my house is so much. If I'm let me finish.
I know where you're coming from.
If I'm Rishi Sunak,
it's the same amount of money.
And I have to have an electricity substation installed to make enough electricity for my electric dam swimming pool. Why isn't he paying his share of the infrastructure?
He's still paying 48 pence a day. No, I get it in that respect. So
what we can do is get rid of the poll tax on pensioners
and just add it to the amount of electricity that you pay.
Now, that's the first eco.
And then the transmission network can take it out of the bills that they receive from the. Okay, that's a nice way of looking at it.
And so the more you, and then the second thing is, rich people consume far more electricity than the poor people. And so they're using more of the network, and the little old lady, is subsidizing them. So what we need as environmentalists and eco-populists, I think we need to be as eco-populist as Farage. And I think we can be.
I'm up for that. We take back control of your energy bills, and we're going to use the British sun. None of that foreign sun. Good old British sun.
So what we can do is we have social tariffs, social banding. If you're a pensioner, at the moment, if you're a low consuming pensioner, what you're paying per unit because of the standing charge is maybe 3 or 4 times what a rich person's paying. So what we do is A, get rid of the standing charge, but B, have social tariffs. So if you're consuming up to 2,000 kilowatts, you pay 10p a unit. If you're using 5,000 watts, you pay 15p for the next. If you're using 30, 40,000, 50,000. So what you're saying is if you want to abuse the system, I call it abuse, and be a high consumer, you pay a high tariff and you use that money to fund the low income people.
I can see that getting a little support with everyone beneath that high threshold.
Yeah.
That's a simple one.
So the interesting fact is that, did you know that the top 1% globally emit the same amount of carbon emissions as the poorest 70%?
Is it 70%?
70% of humanity. The rich are huge emitters. So we need to tax the super rich's emissions to fund the green transition for the poor. It's a win-win.
Maybe a lot of my customers knew that that's going to come along, because I get a lot of rich customers. So I'm not going to sit here and agree with Donnachadh on that one, if you are rich, because I've got a solar business to run. But no, a lot of them wouldn't object. I know people who are using 15,000, 20,000 pounds worth of electricity a year. They have a lifestyle and houses, and these houses have got staff, and it's a different world to just living in a house.
Yeah, I'm with it.
I remember going to one house once. I says, "Why have you got a £12,000 a year electricity bill?" And he stopped me and says, "We're here at least one weekend a month." Wow. Swim pools and all the rest of it left running all the time, so we just turn up and they're on holiday when they get out there. Very quickly on social tariffs, one of the ideas that came out through Twitter, a conversation 2 years ago, and Octopus have started flirting with this idea. It's a really, really good one. Series of people talking. I said, "You know what? I've got a bit of a profile. I'm going to do a video on this and put it out there." I don't claim a feed-in tariff, and I don't claim a smart export guarantee on my system on the house. It's not a personal reason, it's a business reason. The reason is, in 2018, when I had the solar, there was still a feed-in tariff. I knew it was coming to an end. We didn't know what it was going to be replaced with. So I thought, I don't want to take it out, because when I'm doing a consultation with people, I will talk about what I receive. And it's easier to talk about pure solar than when I say pure solar, I mean just talking about the savings, rather than an imaginary sum they might receive from smart export guarantee. We didn't know what was going to go on. So I chose not to take one. But I was exporting, until I got the second EV, I was exporting a lot of energy, maybe a third of the energy I generated, because the battery's only a certain size, a car can only use a certain amount. So you generate so much at times that it was all going down the grid and I wasn't getting paid for it. I would love it if I could say to Mr. Jackson, Greg Jackson, if you're listening, I know your minions follow me, I know. If I could say to Greg Jackson, that house over there is an Octopus customer. I want you to credit them with what I export. So if I've exported 1,000 kilowatt hours, I nominate that person to receive them. So instead of me receiving 15 pence per kilowatt hour on the export, I want them to get that 1,000 kilowatts free of charge. I've given them to Octopus. They can give them to someone else. They've started doing it. We call it #ShareYourSolar. It's a really nice concept if you think about it. You're questioning it in your mind now, aren't you?
But would the person you're nominating pay you?
No.
Okay.
I want to give it away. I want to help one of my neighbours.
Sure.
I want to help a poorer person, an older person, a family member, someone who's down on their luck. Maybe a local charity case. Excuse the expression, but help someone. People do help. I know you do. It's an unusual concept not to want something out of something, but I think there's enough people out there that would do that. When we've done it on Twitter and Facebook, we got a lot of momentum, and Octopus, in fairness to them, they were the only energy company who picked it up.
I think,
and they have started. I don't know how far it's going. I don't know how far they've rolled it out. I've not seen anything else on it, but I think it's a good concept.
It's a new concept, but I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I would have thought, I love the idea that Solar Nation has adopted Solar Aid as their charity.
I've been quite close to Solar Aid over the years, done a lot of work, not a lot of work, but promote them a lot, give them a little bit of money. I think if we can help African people bypass the oil age.
So I think, my thinking was that maybe if there are people who they've got enough money and they could actually donate their feed-in tariff to Solar Aid. It'd be a nice.
You heard it here first. I quite like this. This is a nice concept.
Rather than nominating somebody else,
we've got a page on the Solar Nation.
Somebody getting to free, that's quite complicated. Setting up, I think it's like fairly complicated.
Not with cracking technology.
I like the idea.
It's a code on a button.
Can you imagine if you could do a campaign with Solar Aid to get people who are rich
donate their seg?
Yeah, and it goes directly to Solar Aid.
I'm writing that one down. I like that. Yeah, I like that. We've got a page on the Solar Nation website, solar-power.co.uk, where you can donate to Solar Aid. It tells you more about the sterling work that they're doing, and they're looking to eradicate kerosene from. If you can put solar lighting in, you might save 2 months worth of kerosene. The bills, and that money you've got to light that lasts forever.
Sure.
Yeah, they're doing lots of little entrepreneurial. It's the pollution. It's the kids. Look, in sub-Saharan Africa, they've got 12 hours daylight, 12 hours nighttime. The nights are long all the time. It's like it is here in the end of March or beginning of March. And these kids are sitting doing homework, or doctors in hospitals and in school, and they're breathing in kerosene fumes. It's not good for the eyes. It's not good for the lungs.
But also you can actually replace with fires.
All of that.
Because actually, which obviously has
solar cookers, solar lighting,
yeah.
And also they're now doing, for the really poor communities, they're also doing a subscription service where they pay per kilowatt hour. So the solar system goes in, and they might have USB charge, all sorts of things, but they only pay for the electricity that they use on a subscription model.
I have a question for you. You give me all the questions. One of the things that, because I didn't have batteries for years.
Yep.
And so, like many of us, we adapted our life. We adapted our lifestyles to maximize.
Yeah, we all went to bed at sundown.
Yeah,
and turned everything off.
Yeah, or when the sun was out, we went and turned everything on.
Yes. We only staged it though to make sure that we didn't take anything from the grid when we put 3 machines on. But yes,
exactly. So I've lost my train of thought. So what I don't know whether you came across it, because obviously with the systems that I installed in '98,
yes,
with a 1 kilowatt, it didn't boil a kettle,
nope.
and doesn't cook your food. But now a 3 or 4 kilowatt system, what I did was I bought low wattage kettle and a low wattage.
I remember the conversation. We've actually had a conversation about how much energy a 1 cup machine used. Was it 0.19 of a pence to boil a 1 cup kettle?
No, I'm talking about something different.
Go on.
I'm talking about what people think a kettle uses 3,000 watts.
It does if you leave it on for an hour.
Well, 3,000 watts per hour.
Yeah.
But at any moment, it'll be using 3,000 watts.
Yes.
But then for an hour, it's 3,000 watt hours.
That's right.
But at any moment, it's using 3,000 watts.
Yeah, the power, yes.
And most panels,
Oh, even a 4 kilowatt system won't be peaking at 3 kilowatts when you need it most.
Yeah. So what I did was that there are low wattage kettles.
That's right.
And low wattage hot plates.
Yes.
That actually run. So they use the same amount of electricity. Sorry, they use the same amount of electricity to boil your water, but they take a bit longer. So who cares? So the reason why I'm raising this question is that I want to ask you, if I've got a 500 watt panel in an African home, it's producing 500 watts, it won't boil my kettle.
No, it won't.
But it will boil a 400 watt hot plate.
Only if the angles, and depends on the time of that. Your panels, you've seen on your monitoring, your panels will very rarely peak out at their maximum rated output.
If I've got a 550 watt, I've got a 550, let's say I've got two 550. I've got 2 panels, 2 450 panels, 900 watts. That's not going to boil a kettle or cook or power an oven.
But it will run a 400 watt.
A low wattage.
Yes.
So what we need to be, I'm wondering, have people thought this through? And why aren't the people in Africa, people who are doing solar aid, thinking through, I could get rid of that fire completely?
They probably are. A lot of that.
That could be a revolution.
They use low wattage. It's a conversation. It's a good conversation to have. I just want to mention at this point, a special shout out to Carl James, who was one of my customers from about 10 years ago, lives in a neighbouring village, who does exactly what Donnachadh's talking about. So he's got a low wattage iron kettle, and he's got a bar heater, a tube. You have a tube heater or something.
Yes, right, yeah.
I've got one now myself underneath
infrared
my desk.
panels to do it.
Infrared panels are very good. They don't need them in Africa in the middle of the year over there.
But obviously,
no, it's a good.
It's not relevant. Now it's not relevant because I've got battery. But and the battery takes away now means I can boil it. But for people in poor areas who can only afford 1 or 2 panels and have
low appliances, right? Okay. On that subject, though, let's look at we're no longer members of the EU, but the EU come out with a raft of policies which everyone objected to. Readers of a certain newspaper were told to object to. I'm very careful with my words here, Donnachadh. And the EU said about incandescent light bulbs, we're going over to LED. So we have the low energy tubes and all of those first, and then we went over to LEDs. Now everyone does LEDs, and the LED industry is booming and it's got lovely hues of colour and controllability. They also said washing machines. We're no longer allowed to sell, manufacture or distribute washing machines which have got a hot and cold fill only. So we're only heating up the water that we need rather than cooling down water that we've already heated. So policy can change. They could say no kettle. Didn't they try this with the Hoovers? And this is why Dyson kicked off. saying, you know, they're now saying I can't suck up at 3 kilowatt. Well, nobody needs to suck up at 3 kilowatts anyway. You don't need 3 kilowatt motors.
Regulation is important.
Regulation is very, very important. Some people say it's overregulated, but they can regulate that.
One of the interesting things, going back to eco-populism, the eco-populists, the opponents of climate change.
I like the concept of this. You might see a change to my social media about the eco-populism. I'm liking this one.
Well, the opponents of climate action, nature action, talk about how expensive it is.
They should look at their cost of not doing it.
They talk about the cost of net zero. But one of the things that they don't, if we hadn't, climate action, what has it done? It's inspired the European Union to make our lighting, our wash machines, our cars, our houses more efficient. If we had the same cars, wash machines, lighting, and houses that we had in the 80s, we'd be paying £2,000 or £3,000 or more in energy use now. And what they miss is, okay, it has made our electricity a bit more expensive because
it's not a massive amount though. It's gas that makes our electricity expensive.
And nowadays, but there was a cost.
Yeah, there is a cost.
There was a cost, especially 10 years ago, when renewable energy was expensive, more expensive than fossil fuel gas.
It needed subsidies.
It needed subsidies and was more expensive. But what they forget that investment, you see it on your bill. What you don't see on your bill is a 90% saving on your lighting, the 80% saving on your fridge, your 40% saving on your heating bills, because the regulations imposed by net zero has saved people thousands.
I'm 100% there. Now, one of the things that really strikes me listening to you there, can you just imagine the readers of the popular press and your GBBs and all the rest of it are sitting there and they're reading the headlines they always have, EU are going to eat your children and all the rest of it, yeah? Is it children this week? I don't know, is it immigrants or solar installers this week? Pets this week, okay. So they put the headlines out. What they're actually saying is, you don't deserve cheaper lighting. You don't deserve more efficient washing machines. That's what they're saying when they object.
I remember being on a radio program with Nigel Farage years ago when the European Union was bringing in energy efficiency for lighting. And I had a great time. I
bet you had fun with him, didn't you?
Because I said...
He's a South East London boy. Did he go to school in Dulwich?
He did, yeah, very close, yeah. Rich city boy.
Yes, yeah.
So I said to...
Was he commodities trader or stockbroker?
Right, yeah, commodities trader. So I said to him, I thought you were a patriot. He said, what? What do you mean?
He wouldn't know what the word means.
I said, I thought you wanted to benefit little old ladies.
Yeah.
But what you were doing is twofold. You were actually demanding that little old ladies pay 10 times more for their lighting than they need to if they have efficient light bulbs. So that's the first thing. I said, how could you be anti-little old ladies? And I said, I thought you were a patriot. I said, by using 90% less electricity, that means we reduce the amount of gas we have to import. So again, you're trying to keep Britain addicted to international import and international markets.
That's really important.
And I had a great time. I had teased myself. I thought you were a patriot. But he didn't know what to say.
That is excellent. That is a really good pushback for anyone on our side of the argument. I like that. Anyone who objects to what we're trying to do, don't you want British people to have clean air? Don't you want British people to have cheaper bills? What's up with you?
Being in favour of a stable climate and protecting nature is patriotic.
I think so.
Patriots look after the environment. Farmers at the moment, we're in Norfolk. They're suffering with drought at the moment. No climate, no farmers, no food.
Oh, mate, it's round here. It's the bloody bees that get me. I've written about this. We've talked about it before. We're doing our bit, but the fields are sterile. We were talking about that earlier. The fields around us, they look stunning. They look amazing, beautiful. Where your Weetabix and cornflakes has grown, they're sterile. There's no insects. There's no invertebrates. You do see some deers running across every now and again, but they're literally running away. There's not even any insects for the birds to eat. You go to a solar farm, which everyone's objecting to, the land's replenished, it's rejuvenated, we've got 4 times the amount of wildlife, 20 times the amount of butterflies, all that fauna, and replenishing the food. Ugly solar panels, bad, good land underneath. Beautiful looking cornfields,
No welfare.
are supposed to be good, but they're poisoning us with all the crap that they haven't getting rid of all the wildlife. The world's gone absolutely mad. I wrote a piece on this with the 2 images as well. It's quite powerful. But listen, on food, I wanted to bring back something that we mentioned earlier. You live in Peckham, and we've known each other for many, many years, and we used to get involved in environmental bits and pieces, as well as other things. You were telling me earlier about this little tiny urban landscape where you live. Now, many of you may have heard of Rob Hopkins and the Transition Network. It's all about encouraging people to grow nut trees rather than oak trees. Yeah, things that you can eat, and how are we going to make the transition? So, instead of concreting over and putting astroturf down on your front gardens, you grow your drills of tomatoes and your cabbages and all the rest of it. But you've got this little bit of derelict land just outside where you live, haven't you? Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I think people often forget that food is one of the largest sources of carbon emissions in the world.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Farming
and meat, of course, is the biggest part of our food emissions. But one of the things I find you're talking about, it's really good that you're talking about butterflies. Britain is a nation of nature lovers.
Yes, definitely.
But what we have not succeeded yet in doing is making the link between climate and our food and organic food and pesticides.
Oh, when people realise, yes.
And linking that to nature.
Yep.
Because Britain, people think our green and pleasant land. We are the 12th most nature-deprived nation on Earth. Globally, it's a real moral issue for me, and it's an emotional issue for me. Since I'm 65, 66 years old. Since I was born, we have destroyed 70% of nature.
Wow.
And we're losing it at 1% a year.
This is about fields, hedgerow.
I'm talking about...
This isn't through urban development. This is through mismanaged, or should I say, managed land.
Globally, we have destroyed 70% of nature. I'm not talking about the number of species. I'm talking about the total number of wildlife, the total number of butterflies, birds, mammals, etc. The numbers have decimated. They've gone down 70%. We're losing them at 1% a year.
My God.
Now, I'm a yogi. I cycle.
Yeah.
I'm vegetarian. I'm very healthy. I may live till I'm 90. It may mean that by the time I was born and the time I die, my generation may have destroyed 90% of nature.
Good God.
And that's
a thought and a half, isn't it?
That to me is emotional. It's spiritual.
I can see it.
It's immoral. How dare my generation do that? But the reason why I bring it up is making the link between our lifestyles and the destruction of nature. So we have more people joined nature groups and wildlife groups than any other nation on Earth. And yet we're the most nature-deprived nation on the planet. And our government doesn't invest anything hardly in protecting nature or in educating us, in linking our energy use and our food consumption to nature. And I think it's really important. So coming back to food, I think if we reduce the amount of meat we eat, we can actually reduce the amount of land required to support us by around a factor of 60 to 70%. So we can have 8 billion people on this planet, and we can have 30% of land reserved for nature. Every person who reduces the amount of is creating more space for nature. And I think British people, if they get that message about linking our energy usage, and
we found with changing our diet. I'm a meat eater. We used to have meat and potatoes almost every day. Now, because we've gone zero processed foods and we have gone almost totally organic, I do have cheat nights. I'm human. I'm enjoying more expensive meat less often.
Yeah, cool.
And that to me works. I can have a steak once a fortnight rather than a meat pie every other night.
If everybody had good meat once a week instead of twice a day,
they're going to get the protein, they're going to get what they need.
And you don't have the amount of land that would be released for nature would be amazing.
It's convenience lifestyle though, isn't it,
Donnachadh?
No, that's what people have got.
Hang on,
people are buying into.
Cooking a veggie burger takes the same amount of time as cooking a burger.
But going into a McDonald's and buying a burger.
But they've got veggie burgers in McDonald's.
It's the whole process of, the fast food industry, it is a disposable and convenient industry.
You can have vegetarian fast food.
What would be the impact on the planet if we got rid of McDonald's, got rid of KFC, got rid of Subway, and keep Greggs, but what happens if we got rid of those other equivalents overnight? The amount
I don't
of beef, the amount of chickens, everything that goes into those franchises.
You can have a fast food that serves vegetarian food.
Yeah, you can. They exist. But I want to know about this pocket of land outside your house.
So I want to make the link of why I think growing food
is so important.
It's so important. And making that link.
Well, you've seen around our garden, we grow it. It's important to us.
And since I was a child, I could never understand why would somebody plant an ornamental cherry blossom?
Because they look nice.
But so does a cherry tree.
Bloody sacrilege. You can't beat cherry blossom. My little boy gets a picture underneath that cherry tree every single year, and we've got them from when he was 8 years of age, and it looks stunning, both in the autumn when the leaves all go. We don't get a fruit of it, but it's a great picture and great memories. It's a beautiful standard tree.
Yeah, but cherry trees, cherry fruit trees, produce the same blossom as a cherry. Ornamental cherry. So why would I plant an ornamental cherry when I can have cherries and blossoms?
I understand your logic. So what have you done then? So what have you, apart from your little garden, you've got your south facing back.
So we've got a community association, and I went to them. Let's set up a green group, and they did. We've got a little green group, and so what we did as a green group is we identified any little bit of wasteland in our area in Peckham, and we either went to the landlord or we just did it, and we said why don't we turn this piece of derelict land that's been, fly tipped, and plant fruit trees and shrubs there. So like, for example, our local housing association, they had, those car parks where you have car park with concrete, then a bit of grass, concrete, grass, and it looks boring and horrible. So what we did is we went in car, fruit tree, car, fruit tree, car, fruit tree. And now we've got blossom in spring and fruit in summer. And so we've done that around the neighbourhood, and slowly we call it an urban ribbon orchard.
I like that.
And so what it does get the idea thinking to people that instead of having...
But we need more trees anyway. I mean, they're talking about carbon capture and storage. Plant more trees. It's so simple. Are you aware of the Great Green Wall?
Yeah, amazing.
That is one of the most amazing... Have you seen what they're doing in the Senai?
Sure.
With the swales and collecting all the rainwater to replenish, and they're actually rejuvenating deserts, dead land. They're using ancient, thousands of year old techniques to harvest, and then they're planting seed bombs in Ethiopia. Is it Ethiopia going along the Great Green Wall in dung? Because if you put the seeds in dung, first of all, it's got this natural compost and it grows, but it means that the normal animals that would eat the seeds when they're planting won't eat them because they're covered in shit.
Sure.
So they're just throwing millions of them out of the aeroplanes and just letting them all grow. That's absolutely amazing. But we could do a lot more with that, couldn't we? You see these new build estates, we see them in villages where they're going to put 30 houses, a little cul-de-sac because the farmer's given away. You can always tell it's a local farmer that sold the land because it becomes Williams Close or Mr. Jones's Drive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I've got to put my name in there.
But why can't new housing estates have orchards in them?
Go to Belgium. There's a certain density population where you have a communal recycling area. You have a communal green area when you put these. There's a place in Belgium.
Why not a communal orchard?
All of that sort of stuff. Well, we tried that. But that's down to individuals to do that in the transition network, things that we used to do years ago.
Yes, it's down
to
why can't we actually get a council saying on a planning application for a new housing?
Well, no, they have got to do a certain amount of greening and growth.
But
there's no orchard as such. No, you're right. There should be, and beds should have stuff that grows that people can eat. But usually, it's right. The problem with councils is if we authorise that, there's road pollution. If someone gets something, I remember Burgess Park when we wanted to turn it into a community orchard over in Chumley Gardens. They're now doing it. This is years and years. It was Arlie and Harrison's
Somebody
idea.
will fall out of the tree and hurt themselves.
No. It was, why can't we turn this piece of land here into a community orchard? This was before the car park was built and all the rest of it. It was because the land could be contaminated, and if anybody ate anything and it was attributed back, they're the ones who would be sued.
People find up 1,000 different reasons why not to act.
It's easier to say no than it is to actually do.
Sure, but that's
everyone's looking after their own arse rather than just cracking on with it.
No, I disagree with you. I think one thing that's very valuable to me, and I learned after I was involved in politics, was that human beings' psychology requires stability. To survive as a human, you have to have a certain amount of stability in your life. You also have to have this ability to change slowly, because if you remain the same, and you have to have ability to act urgently if an emergency happens.
Yep, fight or flight.
And so I call it the 70-25-5 social theory. And I actually believe that the reason why I explain it, let's say you're a married couple. You want the relationship to survive, obviously. So you need to have either the same home, same work, same activity, and some stability in that relationship for it to survive.
Yes.
But if you do the same thing every day and never do anything different and never talk about anything different or never meet anybody different, the relationship becomes stale and it dies. So a healthy relationship has to be open to gradual change. Others will die. And then if the relationship becomes abusive, let's say violent or otherwise abusive, you either need to be able to get an emergency, get help, or get out of it.
Or get out.
So I call it the 70-25-5.
Yep.
And then that applies to couples, it applies to organizations, it applies to councils, it applies to government. And as you go up the decision ladder, the requirement for safety to be stable gets higher and higher. So the people who actually say, who oppose change are the people representing that 70% of stability. And so what they're testing those of us who are saying we've got to change, and those of us like you and I think we've got to radically change, we have to prove that there is a crisis. And second, we have to prove that if we act with the urgency required, it won't scupper the economy. So I say, you could tell people the building's on fire and you've got to run out of it. But if there's a motorway outside the door and they all get killed when they run out the door, there's a problem. So we have that. What that does as a psychology changes your attitude to people who oppose you to actually, they are actually society's safety mechanism.
Yeah, yes, I get that.
And that changes your whole psychological relationship with people who are angry with you. Because people who are angry with us, they're saying, you are threatening the 70% of stability that I am feeling.
You're threatening our way of life. We're all going to have to, yeah. Because I can see the headlines screaming at me from exactly what you're talking about.
The fossil-fueled economy has created a rich society, a safe society, a healthy society, a well-fed society. And what we are now saying is the basis of that wealth, stability, and health and food
is actually killing us.
Is killing us. And so what we need to do is adapt and change it so that we can have that wealth, we can have that health, we can have that happiness, but it doesn't actually kill us in the future. That's our job. But we have to tell people it's safe to do so.
That's what this is about. It's about how do we adapt. So going back to that little patch of land in Peckham, you've planted up with stuff that people can eat.
It's around this size.
It's a small area.
It's a small room.
It's the size of a car.
No, it's maybe 2 cars.
Okay, the size of 2 cars.
And so what we've planted there, it's got a wall around it.
Yeah.
We've planted a walnut tree.
Like it.
We've planted golden gooseberry.
Yeah.
Purple gooseberry. Red currant.
Prickly though, aren't they?
Black currant. Raspberries. Wild garlic and strawberries. And we've got some wildflowers as well.
Yeah.
Little patch. My office is in the house. It's on the upstairs room. Overlooks it. Every day I see pensioners, people walking by, kids, and the kids stopping their mother to look at this tiny patch.
Can you imagine just seeing that if you're in inner city London? We've done rural science at school, so we had an allotment and all the rest of it. But you just imagine if you don't have that in your life and you see that, you go home and you might plant a window box. There might be a few herbs on the kitchen.
Yeah.
Might be a few herbs up in the roof under some grow lights. Met a bloke once. He says he had a big energy bill for a small house. So I go in there. I says, right, okay, I've done the assessment. You need this amount of time. I said, can I see your plant room? And I meant his utility room. I says, can I see your plant room? He looked at me and went, yeah. We went upstairs. And then upstairs again, there's loft, and it was a plant room. Wow, nice. And then I found out why he needed so much solar to grow his plants. Wow, but going back to these sort of plants, the herbal stuff, just imagine being able to encourage or inspire. If you've got a young mum, young dad, late 20s, 30s, walking along, and they're teaching their kid about growing food. They see that, and they have a conversation, which is you do as a parent. That kid now knows at 2 and 3 and 4 years of age what they can do. They're going to go home and badger their parents to go and do something. So that little tiny thing can be a catalyst for other people in the community. You don't have to put a signpost out. You don't have to get on Twitter and Facebook and do a live video. Look what I've done. You just do it and leave it for the community.
Well, you do both.
You got to do a little bit.
You do it and you tell people.
You got to do a little bit.
No. I think you need to do both. That's a really interesting. It's a really interesting debate in the climate movement. There's a whole body of thought that says individual action doesn't count.
Oh, it does.
Hang on. Yeah. There are people who write columns in the papers, and who write, and they'll pontificate, say it's totally irrelevant what you do.
Because of what they're doing over there.
It's cut the government and the oil companies. And then there's people that think individual action is all we got to do. I think we've got to do both, because I actually believe the most important thing about putting our own house in order, like you have, and I got involved in this because I had an accident. I was a dancer, had an accident, and my therapist was going to visit Yanomami, and that's how I got involved in the climate movement. I was a ballet dancer, didn't give a damn about the environment, and I saw firsthand the destruction of the rainforest.
Yep.
And I became aware of the genocide of the indigenous people that our lifestyles was causing.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
They have lived there for 20,000 years. These people were just at Stone Age lifestyles, and their environment was as pristine after 20,000 years.
On them.
But within 150 years of the Industrial Revolution, we've brought the entire Earth systems to the edge of destruction. And so I became aware of the huge destruction that our lifestyles were bringing to these people, and it broke my heart. I came back to London. I thought, what can I do? And I didn't have much money at the time. I actually decided, I'm a Gandhian by principle. And Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world.
That's a very powerful thing when people think about that, and if it resonates, that is a very powerful thing. It means that it feels like you've empowered yourself. I know I've empowered myself to be the change I want to see. I want to see everyone doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, but what a lot of people think when they hear the phrase, be the change you wish to see in the world, they think, change yourself. But that's not what Gandhi meant, in my view.
Change the environment and change.
No.
Go on.
I believe that my having a carbon negative house is not going to save the planet.
No, it's not.
But what it does do, it gives me the spiritual and moral authority to go and ask my local councillor, my energy company, my MP, the people I'm speaking to on TV.
I get it. What are you doing about it? And you can say, I'm doing it.
Yeah. And I believe it gives you the moral authority to demand change. Because do you remember John Prescott? John Prescott came into government promising that he would have failed if he hadn't brought the amount of traffic down by the time of his end of the Blair administration. But he was two jags Prescott. And this is not a personal attack on him, but he wasn't practicing it himself. And I believe because he wasn't practicing himself, he didn't have the authority to persuade the country to follow him.
Okay, I love John Prescott for two reasons. One, bang. That's the way. I'm not into violence.
But you see, I believe practicing what you preach is hugely important.
On him and his two jags. First of all, I did like John Prescott a lot. God rest his soul. He died, was it last year? Was it last year? Standing outside John Smith House as a young police officer at the tail end of 1997, when Blair and Labour had just got in and they were looking at elections for the NEC. Mandelson was trying to get onto the National Executive Committee. It's about a 9-man committee, isn't it? And they all used to sit down there. And me and Colin, my mate, was on duty and was told to get down to John Smith House down the Walworth Road. So we go down there because John Prescott's alive, and at the time he was Deputy Prime Minister. So was told to stand there. All the press were there. And then a bus pulled up. He got out of his bloody jag at the Elephant and Castle because he was told all the press are there, and he jumped onto a bus just to fool them all. And he got that was smart politician. If he had turned up in a jag, that would have just reinforced the message that they had about him. But he turned up on a bus just to spook them. I thought that was brilliant. A little bit of gamesmanship from a politician.
Yeah, but he didn't achieve his goal.
No, he didn't. He might not have, but I mean that was just one of the little bites between it.
I think actually it's a really important point, because what you are saying, he was dishonest.
In a way, yes, in a way. But what he was also doing was pushing back against the media, who reinforced two jags when he only had one ministerial car.
But he wasn't. If a politician advocates something, if a climate environmentalist is advocating something.
He was advocating using the bus.
And we're not exactly. But he wasn't using a bus himself.
No, he wasn't. No, I see the point.
And there are environmentalists who attack the government, who attack oil companies, who attack aviation companies, and they fly on holidays.
Yeah, that's
it doesn't work. Not because I'm saying they're evil or they're wrong,
okay,
but they don't have the moral authority to demand change.
This is where I'm with you.
Subliminally, I think the public, whether they know it or not, they can actually detect that if I am saying our climate means that is damaged and it's threatening our existence. It means
we can't do something or shouldn't do something. We shouldn't do it. You're right. On that subject, no, you're spot on. I genuinely have a guilt at the moment. I haven't flown for 15 years. Now, my mum lives in Spain.
Sure.
We don't fly.
Wow,
we don't fly.
That's tough.
It is. It has been over the years. But, she understands. They made their choices and all the rest of it. She does travel, and it's not going to last forever, but we don't.
Do you see her when she comes here?
Oh, yeah. Comes and stays. And my sisters live in America, lived over there since before I joined the police in the 80s. So they're back and forwards all the time. They're environmental clusterfucks of the highest order. But I have flown. Right. We've done some shuttles from Norwich Airport over to Amsterdam. It's a 35-minute flight, but it's still a flight. So I have got a little bit of guilt. So in that respect, I don't want to fly, but I really like Amsterdam. And it's easier to get to now because of the Eurostar. But last summer, you couldn't get into Holland on the Eurostar. Yeah. But from Watlington Station, I can get from a mile away here, Watlington train station, King's Cross, walk across the road to St Pancras, I can end up in Amsterdam. It might take me 6 hours, but I can do that. But it only takes 35 minutes from Norwich.
Sure. But hang on, doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Oh, by the time, right, okay. Leaving Schiphol Airport on the last flight into Norwich Airport.
No. Leaving your hotel.
Let's leave Schiphol Airport because you get kicked out of the hotel early and you have to spend all day. So leaving Schiphol Airport, from the minute we left until the minute I was sitting in my pajamas at home watching TV was exactly 2 hours. It was a 37-minute flight.
No, but you've left out the most important part.
What's that?
Which is the time from leaving your hotel. How many hours is that?
In Amsterdam, you've got 2 hours there. But in
Norwich, that's 4 hours.
Right, in Norwich, when you turn up at Norwich
4
Airport,
hours door to door.
This is when you turn up at Norwich Airport.
Why did you leave that out?
When you turn up at Norwich Airport in the morning, they say, "Now listen out to the tannoy announcements. We've got 2 planes leaving this morning." That's it. When you come back and you're on the last plane, the bloke is there with a security hat on, with his pajamas, going, "Last one in, close the doors. You've got nothing to declare. Go through that way, please." You are literally off the plane, through the terminal, and out.
But for most people,
it's nothing.
For most people in most large airports,
it's different. You've got to be there for 3 hours before a flight, and and it takes an hour and a half to get off not for just taking the hand luggage.
Sure, yeah.
And you move through.
But going back, I mean, you're raising the point about flying.
Flying, yeah.
A lot of people kind of heard the message that flying is really damaging. Of course, it depends how long the flight is.
Of course, it does.
But what I try and do to get across to people, the impact of flying, is that an average middle class family maybe have one major holiday a year, and a lot of them might think, okay, let's go to Disney World.
Yep.
Rather than Disneyland. Disneyland is twice as long, so it's the other side of America. But Disney World is on this side, it's in Florida. So that's an average holiday to a lot of middle-class families in Britain. So how much carbon does that take? It takes around 9 to 10 tons of carbon for a family, for a family of 4. I'm talking about a family of 4.
That's a 4 kilowatt solar system, 5 years.
So
to offset.
Thank you. So how I explain it, the average household emits half a ton of carbon for electricity.
Right.
Mains electricity, not solar electricity.
Yeah.
So half a ton of carbon a night. That means to make up the carbon pollution that they've emitted with one holiday to Disney World, they'd have to turn off all the electricity in their house.
18 years.
I think that really gets across. How many penguins is that?
That brings us nicely on to saving penguins, doesn't it? The Solar Shed's been saving penguins for years. No, I haven't. My customers have been saving penguins. In fact, we calculated penguins at, for each metric ton of carbon, Was it a kilogram? A ton of carbon is one penguin,
Sure.
for example. When we first started this industry, we used to say to people, for every 4 kilowatt solar system, that's going to be around about 2 tons of carbon that's been offset. Because of the grid intensity, we're now looking at 1.6 tons for a 4 kilowatt, which means that we've reduced the grid intensity.
Sure.
That, to me, when I saw that a few months back, I thought that was a real, hey, look what we've done. We've reduced it. And then 3 days ago, 34% of the energy at 11:30, 12 o'clock, 34%, not just from low carbon, but from solar.
Amazing.
We've done 25% before. Every day we're going to break new records because there's more solar being deployed, which means a lot more penguins being saved. We've actually adopted a couple of penguins. You can adopt your penguins as well. We've done ours from the Sea Life Centre at Hunstanton. And we're going to make sure that they're looked after. But every time you go solar, basically you're saving another penguin, because if we can stop the ice from melting, then the little flippy flappy fellas have got somewhere to live, haven't they? Donnachadh, I've had a really nice chat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Keep up the good work.
Right, and you, sir, and you, and you. I've got to make sure that this is still recording and we've still got power in the phone now.
How many hours was that?